Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah, and welcome to a special edition of In the Headlines, where rather than discussing the central papers of the Ahmadiyya Muslim community, we'll be taking a look at the newspapers which have covered the Annual Peace Symposium hosted by the Ahmadiyya Muslim community, in which the worldwide Caliph, His Holiness Hazrat Mirza Masroor Ahmad, may Allah be his helper, discusses the true teachings of Islam and discusses the current issues which are facing the world today. To discuss this with me in the studio today, I am joined with Imam Masroor Ahmad Clark, missionary and Imam of the Ahmadiyya Muslim community. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah.
Wa alaikum assalam.
Jazakallah for coming down today.
My pleasure.
And of course, Brother Khalil Yusuf Sahib, who is a member of the Press and Media Office International. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah. Jazakallah for coming down to the studio today to discuss a variety of papers, not only in the UK, but coverage has also been given to us within the continent in Greek, actually. And we're going to be starting with this exact paper from the Greek Reporter. The title, as you can see, it mentions Ahmadiyya leader warns of critical need for peace at London Symposium. Of course, we know the theme of the Peace Symposium was the critical need for peace. This is a very generalized and expansive topic at the same time. It can mean a lot of different things. What exactly was it, Khalil Sahib, that His Holiness actually spoke about? What were the issues that were addressed?
I mean, this was a very interesting Peace Symposium this year, and it was particularly interesting because when you look at conflict throughout the world, whether it's Brexit here, whether it's the millions of people that have lost their lives in conflicts throughout the world, or whether it's economic disparities, Hazur's speech this year focused on many, many different aspects. And one of those things that it focused on really was, which he concluded towards the end, was a three-point plan for peace, which I think was very interesting. And what we've seen actually is that we've had a great deal of the media cover Hazur's speech this year, more I think than in previous years. We had Sky News, we've had Daily Mail online, we've had the Evening Standard, we had lots of national newspapers and international media. So I think this speech as a whole, including this three-point plan, was very interesting for the media and certainly very interesting for politicians who I hope will implement it.
Right. I mean, this isn't the first time His Holiness has addressed a lot of the issues in the Peace Symposium, and we've had previous Peace Symposiums as well. We have The Guardian, which has actually covered one angle of it, is with regards to a threat of a nuclear war and a third world war. And I think this is something which previously, if somebody had spoken about it, people would not have taken it so seriously. But I think just recently, even the Express Online has actually dedicated an entire page to World War III.
Yeah.
And I think people are actually beginning to realize this threat is actually very current. A nuclear war, a global war, World War III, different kinds of things that we hear about. What exactly was it that His Holiness spoke about and has been warning people about for a very long time?
I think you hit the nail on the head there. His Holiness has been talking about this really pressing issue of World War III for many, many years. And it's only now really that people are starting to pay heed to those words. Exactly for word, pretty much, His Holiness has been given warnings about this. And now the world is seeing those things coming true, be that in a financial sense, in an economic sense, or indeed in terms of war and nuclear capability. We see examples of this throughout the world, be that in the South China Sea or in the Korean Peninsula, or the tension between, say, Russia and the US. I mean, there's so many different examples. Right. But His Holiness has reiterated this from time and time again. And in this Peace Symposium, again, His Holiness drew attention towards the fact that these tensions and the relationship between nations across the world is grating. And they're starting to foment hatred and disunity, which is something that needs to be addressed to ensure global peace.
Absolutely. And we have this uncertainty around the world, but we actually have it here at home as well, in the United Kingdom at the moment. And this is something that London Post has actually picked up on. Of course, that is Brexit. We know there's a lot of uncertainty with regards to Brexit at the moment. The second Brexit deal has just recently been rejected as well. A lot of uncertainty, and this is exactly what the London Post has picked up about. His Holiness actually mentioned this issue in the Peace Symposium. What exactly was that all about?
Well, the Jamaat doesn't have a position one way or the other on Brexit, and Hazur's point, whether it's in relation to Brexit or whether it's in relation to other disparities, is that collectivism is important. If you want to create a peaceful world, then you have to work together. And when you seek to isolate yourself, then you create a couple of issues. One of them is that you create even more economic disparities. Hazur mentioned the rise of the far right, and you're seeing these issues that are arising not just with Brexit, but in other countries where you are seeing problems of immigration, education, which falsely are being associated essentially as being problems to do with Islam. So Huzur captured all of those issues in a way that helps people to understand that when you make decisions about governance in a country, you should make decisions not just about yourself in isolation, but thinking about how your conduct and how your behavior, how your governance processes affect others. And so that's what his point essentially was, is that collectivism amongst nations is necessary so that you create a peaceful world where there are less economic disparities.
So we've got issues like Brexit, you spoke about nuclear war, and I think one fitting part of the address His Holiness actually mentioned was, and I quote, "The world is stuck in a vicious cycle of conflict and counter-conflict. As rivalries ferment and hatreds become even more deeply entrenched, no one knows where such issues will finally lead us or how horrific the consequences will prove to be." And then he carries on, and we're going to move on to this next paper. In that, another quote is mentioned, and it says, "Thus, it is imperative that nations and their leaders not only focus on their own national interests, but consider what is best for the world at large. Dialogue with other nations and communities is vital." And I think that's exactly what we try to achieve in the Annual Peace Symposium as well. Yep. So, Mansour, we can see there's a lot of different things that the media have picked up upon. We're going to turn to another thing they picked up upon very soon, which is, of course, Shamima Begum's issue. But before I speak about that, you've actually studied journalism yourself. My question to you is, if you actually had the opportunity to cover this event as a journalist, how would you have approached it? What would have been your takeaway points from this event?
Do you know what, at the outset, I'll say it would be a tough one, because usually when someone talks about something, they only talk about one thing. But here His Holiness has talked about and hit upon so many crucial and fundamental points within society that to choose between them would be a tough challenge in itself. But looking at the way that His Holiness has spoken about them, he's spoken about the issues that have led towards building a society as a whole. He's talked about the need for dialogue. He's talked about the need for unity. He also talked about the world working together in terms of economy, in terms of finance as well, in terms of currency, he mentioned. So, but for me, one of the big takeaways in regards to this Peace Symposium specifically was definitely about the need for dialogue and about the concept of the nuclear war. But also in regards to immigration, which many people also know, just last year as well, His Holiness talked about immigration in a way which is unheard of from a religious leader, to address the valid concerns of people on the right, but also to look at the concerns of the people on the left and to bridge the divide, as it were.
Absolutely. There is another thing which at the moment the public is I think, very divided upon, and that is, of course, the issue of Shamima Begum at the moment. Something that a lot of different papers picked up on. We had the Evening Standard talking about it, we've got Sky News, we've got My London, we've even got the Mail Online that's actually written something about that as well. So a lot of different things to say. Khalil Saib, I would ask you about this. This can be a very complex issue. We have, on the one hand, people who would happily have her come back to the UK, and of course she's just had a child. She's had a child as well, and the child has just recently passed away. That's a whole different issue. On the other hand, we have those who say that she was fighting and supporting ISIS, so for that reason she shouldn't be allowed back. Then there's those who say that she should be sent to a country like Bangladesh because of her parents' nationalities. It's really, really complex situation. And what did His Holiness, when he was asked about this, and he was asked about this quite a bit, I think, have to say about that?
Look, it's a really complex issue. And it's a complex issue because when you're talking about somebody who engages in alleged extremism overseas, there are circumstances where you might not want them into this country. But there are circumstances equally where you might show compassion and bring them into this country, which was the position originally of the Jamaat, which is because she had a baby, then she should be, or the child should be shown compassion and brought to this country. However, she should be put on trial. And if she is convicted, she should be sentenced. And if she is not convicted, she should nevertheless be monitored because the security of the country is important. Now, Huzur said, given that the baby has now died, and given that the Home Secretary has revoked her citizenship, then another Muslim country should take her. And since her parents are from Bangladeshi origin, then maybe Bangladesh could consider taking her. So Huzur's position was not to say, well, she should go to Bangladesh. I mean, it was given the circumstances, something must happen to her because she's now been made stateless. And his position was that Muslim countries should take responsibility.
Absolutely. And we hear the word ISIS a lot in the news. And right now I can see the word ISIS big printed here on the Mail Online, ISIS jihadi. And unfortunately, ISIS is linked with Islam a lot. Of course, the word itself, Islamic State, suggests that. But does ISIS actually have anything to do with Islam?
You know, it's really interesting, because when you look back at almost a prophecy of the Holy Prophet Muhammad, peace and blessings of God be upon him, he said a time would come when nothing would remain of Islam other than the name of Islam. And it's interesting to see in today's society, the one word that we keep seeing is Islam. It's the Islamic State, only by name, not by characteristics or by what they do. We see His Holiness Hazrat Mirza Masroor Ahmad has repeatedly talked about what does being a Muslim actually mean. A Muslim is someone who is subservient to God, but also who spreads peace. And these are categorically actions by these criminal organizations that are categorically against the teachings of Islam, and be that in every single way possible. We look at all the reports that we read, you ask any true Muslim around the world, and they would condemn these attacks as something which has nothing to do with Islam, in fact, contradictory to the basic teachings of Islam.
Absolutely. And this is a lot of the things that were mentioned in the Annual Peace Symposium. We actually had an opportunity, one of our brothers, the representative of the Ahmadiyya Muslim Community, Farooq Aftab, had the opportunity to be interviewed by London Live. He was asked about what kind of coverage the Annual Peace Symposium normally receives and what kind of message we would like people to take away with. This is what he had to say.
This event is, picked up by the world's media, but how well covered is it here in the UK?
I think it could be covered a lot better, by the mainstream media. It is difficult getting them there, but these are issues of relevance. Issues talked about day in, day out, but it just seems sometimes with the media, when they've got the right people there, the right voices, they're not there. And then, as you saw in that clip, it says, where are the Muslim leaders? Well, here you've got the leading Muslim leader all around the world, who's equivalent to the Pope, and he's giving a message. But we think there could be a better media presence, and if the media did do it, it creates responsibility as well, and it will help bring our society together and bridge any gaps and divisions, rather than people saying burning of flags or killings of people. Say, look, here's a voice that resonates with this is what Islam is about. There's nothing to fear at all.
That was Farooq Aftab, spokesperson for the Ahmadiyya Muslim Community, who spoke about the need for leadership and the fact that we do have a representative for Islam, who is His Holiness Hazrat Mirza Masroor Ahmad, the worldwide head of the Ahmadiyya Muslim Community. And it's imperative that people realise that and that there is a voice for Islam. How important, Khalil Saab, do you think it is for there to be a leadership like this?
Well, it's absolutely necessary, because as Mansoor Saab said before, there was going to be a time where nothing would be left of Islam but name. And obviously these divisions that we have in Islam were predicted by the Holy Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and what we see now is a manifestation of what he had said. So leadership is important, because Muslims and Islam needs to be united, and they need to be united under two core purposes. One of them is the worship of Allah, and the second is the service of mankind. And unless you have a divinely guided Khilafat, which you have here, it is very difficult for people to unite and to be able to deal with some of the real modern challenges that people face without having some kind of guidance as to what the Holy Quran says, which is our primary source of law, or what the Sunnah say, or after that, what the Hadith say. So the answer to your question is that leadership is absolutely necessary, and we're very blessed to have that in the Jamaat.
Absolutely, absolutely. Brother Mansoor, Brother Khalil, thank you very much for giving up your time to come and talk to us today about all of the publications and giving us your views as well. Unfortunately, that's all we've got time for this time. You can, of course, catch up with the Annual Peace Symposium online on MTA, online one on YouTube. Until next time, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.